live. Let's see, it's still thinking. Yep, we should be live. So, welcome everyone to the next episode of the Cocktail Apocalypse. Happy hour at the end of the world. I am once again joined by the lovely Stephanie Boudet and the lovely Jeremy Anderson. Greetings, both of you. How are you doing? How are you doing today, Stephanie?
Better, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I've been a lot better. But here we are. Um,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeremy, how
Yeah,
are you
And
doing?
boy,
yeah. I'm just going to stick to social norms and say, "Oh, I'm good."
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not good, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah. My standard response is usually not dead yet. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
still above ground and kicking, huh? Yeah,
At the moment. At the
at
moment.
the moment. Yeah, yeah.
So, today's episode, we are looking at Pluto going into the sign of Aquarius. And we were talking about how the best way to begin this conversation, or what would be the best way to begin this conversation. And I thought that maybe we should start with the archetype of Pluto itself, because we want
Hmm.
to kind of address how this fits into this idea of the cocktail apocalypse, right? How is
Mhm.
Pluto going into Aquarius apocalyptic?
Right.
So I thought to get us started, I'm going to defer to Rick Tarnas. So shout out Rick Tarnas and his classic work now, Cosmos and Psyche. And I'm just going to read directly out of here for the archetype of Pluto. To summarize the consensus of contemporary astrologers, Pluto is associated with the principle of elemental power, depth, and intensity, with that which compels, empowers, and intensifies whatever it touches, sometimes to overwhelming and catastrophic extremes, with the primordial instincts, libidinal and aggressive, destructive and regenerative, volcanic and cathartic, eliminative, transformative, ever evolving, with the biological processes of birth, sex, and death, the cycle of death and rebirth, with upheaval, breakdown, decay, and fertilization, violent purgatorial discharge of pent up energies, purifying fire, situations of life and death extremes, power struggles, all that is titanic, potent, and massive. Pluto represents the underworld and underground in all senses: elemental, geological, instinctual, political, social, sexual, urban, criminal, mythological, demonic. It is the dark, mysterious taboo and often terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface of things, beneath the ego, societal conventions, and the veneer of civilization, beneath the surface of the earth that is periodically unleashed with destructive and transformative force. Pluto impels, burns, consumes, transfigures, resurrects. In mythic and religious terms, it is associated with all myths of descent and transformation, and with all deities of destruction and regeneration, death and rebirth. Dionysus, Hades and Persephone, Pan, Medusa, Lilith, Inanna, Isis and Osiris, the volcano goddess Pele, Quetzalcoatl, the serpent power, Kundalini, Shiva, Kali, Shakti.
That does not sound pleasant, just for the record.
Well, death and rebirth probably isn't very pleasant, but often necessary. And,
Right.
Hmm.
shout out Dionysus. Woo. He actually talks a little bit more. I didn't go into, but I think one of the things that's important, maybe I should read this. So I'm going to, with respect to Pluto's discovery, the synchronistic phenomena in the decades immediately surrounding 1930 and more generally in the 20th century include the splitting of the atom and unleashing of nuclear power, the titanic technological empowerment of modern industrial civilization and military force, the rise of fascism and other mass movements, the widespread cultural influence of evolutionary theory and psychoanalysis with their focus on the biological instincts. I'll just stop it there. I think That gives us plenty to chew on. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
uh, I've got. I looked up the myth of Hades, Pluto as well. Um, and I don't know that this is that we need to go into that right now. Maybe it'll come up. There aren't a lot of myths though involving Hades. Probably the best known one is the one that's the foundation of the Eleusinian mysteries, the rape of Persephone, where he
Hmm.
Mhm.
grabs Persephone, and Persephone is of course, the queen of the underworld, except for when she comes out, every summer, spring, to Earth, but she always has to go back. So there's a lot there, and I think part of our focus is going to be on some of these general themes, but also the unconscious and the depths. I think that's going to come into play. And I think that just this idea of the central notion of birth and or death and rebirth, that right there is kind of what makes this apocalyptic.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And
And
you know, oh, go ahead.
no, no, no. Go ahead. Continue.
To build on the idea that the best known myth of Hades is the rape of Persephone, right? And that in itself, that story is cyclical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You have Persephone who's taken to the underworld where she becomes queen, but 6 months out of the year she goes back to she goes back to the heavens, she goes back to her mother, and
Mm-hmm.
there we have spring and the promise of life.
Yeah.
So I think that's importantly tied to this because when we talk about Pluto, a lot of it is about our subconscious and what happens with our subconscious. Well,
Mhm.
when it is brought to light, we start integrating it, and we have this newfound promise,
Right.
of
Things have to
life.
change at that point.
Hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
would I would also add that I think it's important, in regards to this myth of Pluto and Persephone, that this was, of course, the foundation for the Eleusinian mysteries,
mhm.
and that was an initiation.
Yeah.
And all journeys into the underworld and the return are initiatory.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So it seems that that is one of the primary themes that we've got going on here, is that there is a kind of initiation
Hmm.
that we are collectively going through. But the other part here is the signs that it is that Pluto's been in, where it was, and where it is going into. I've got I don't know exactly how to do this in a easy way, but Stephanie had a chart. I'm probably going to cover someone up. There we go.
Oh, there we go. There
Yeah,
we
I
go.
covered me up.
It
That's
covers you.
perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah, keep the pretty people up there. Um, but so Stephanie,
We'll put this up through the broadcast.
hey, that's fine by me. No one can see me pick my nose.
There we
So
go.
yeah. So walk us through this, if you can.
Okay, so currently where we have Pluto right now is at the 29th, like 29th and 50 minute of Capricorn,
Mm-hmm.
which means, okay, so that vertical line between Capricorn and Aquarius is basically what Pluto is currently sitting on.
Right.
Um,
Before we get too deep into this, can I just ask, what the heck is this?
this is an astrological chart. It's a
Okay.
very rudimentary astrological chart, but this basically shows the signs, uh,
Hmm.
starting
So
with Aries, and then goes through the zodiac.
okay.
Each one of these signs has 29 degrees, starting at 0 to 29.
Hmm.
Um, so, and also what I have in there is the rulers of each of the signs by their
Ah.
planetary signs. So, Aries has Mars as its
Mhm.
ruler, Taurus has Venus, and so on and so forth. Gemini is Mercury, So anyways, if we go up to Capricorn, we see that Capricorn is ruled by Saturn.
Okay. Okay.
And classically speaking, so is Aquarius. It is the only consecutive signs that are ruled by this have the same planetary ruler. Both are ruled
Okay.
by Saturn. And then in the 1700s, we had the discovery of Uranus. So Uranus is then associated with Aquarius as well. But I think it's important to note that Saturn rules both of these, and these two signs rule. They kind of work together.
Okay.
What happens with Pluto in Capricorn, the results really come through in Aquarius.
Okay.
With Saturn kind of overseeing both of those.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Thank you for that. I'm not
mhm.
very good with astrology. I've got a general understanding, but some of the stuff is going to be way over my head, just for the record. So
Yeah,
I'll play the everyman, or whatever it is, every person.
and that's perfect. That's perfect, because this is not intuitive or easy if you're not aware of astrology, and I know a lot of people are not. So maybe more people that listen to Rebel Spirit Radio are more aware
Mm,
of astrology than others, but even then, a lot of people um, don't quite follow it. So
okay.
It,
any
it,
questions
it is
are
its own
fine.
language.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
it's totally its own language, and it's why people are like, "Oh no, she's one of those who talks like,
Yeah.
where's your Venus located?" I'm not going to
Right.
answer that, but
I dated a person like that.
yeah,
I'm
right.
just kidding.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't have any questions other than the, I guess, the characteristics or qualities of Sagittarius, and then the characteristics and qualities of Aquarius. And
Or
then,
Capricorn, I think you
oh,
mean.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Capricorn. I don't know why I keep saying Sagittarius. But yeah, Capricorn and Aquarius. And then I guess we need to like put them together with Pluto and what's the
Hmm.
interaction there.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, as we said, Capricorn ruled by Saturn. Capricorn is a Earth sign. It is a cardinal Earth sign, so it starts things. It's a starter. Um, and it deals with things that are foundational, institutions, um, uh, whether they are physical or even like more like the institution of marriage. Um, things that are establishment are through the sign of Capricorn, and Saturn
Okay.
rules over all the things that are long term. Uh, Saturn is one who makes sure that it's known as a karma planet, because it's basically you have to do the work, you have to show your work,
Mm,
um, and you know you need to follow the rules. Capricorn is very much into this idea of structures, that which sustains and lasts. And because it's a cardinal sign, it's always like starting something.
okay.
Um, and what's interesting about Saturn is it's always also the ruler of Aquarius, which is more about humanitarianism, science,
Mm,
innovation. And that's where Uranus comes in as the co-ruler, because it's like really revolutionary. It Things coming out of the blue, surprises. Um, it fits the archetype of the pioneer, the outsider, the one who looks from outside inward, and that's where you get changes occurring. And how Saturn fits into there is that once things are knocked down through revolution, it reestablishes the new rules. So that's where you get that connection between the two signs.
okay.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, and Uranus, Rick Tarnas identifies as being Promethean.
yeah. Hmm.
Mm.
Uh, you know,
So
bringing. bringing the fire in, but also having to pay for that, right?
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it it's not easy for Prometheus, you know.
No, it's not.
Right. Getting his liver chewed out, etc.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You're used to that.
yep.
Um,
New liver, same shit.
oh,
Can we say that word on
so
the live stream?
Yeah,
yeah,
we can
yeah.
say
Okay.
whatever the hell we want. I'll
Fuck
go
yeah.
through and
Fuck
make
yeah.
it so that it's not safe for children.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
In general, anything I do is probably not safe for children. Um, should I remove the sign? Shall I return? Shall I join you
Yeah,
again?
yeah, yeah. You could remove it, so we could
Okay.
now
The yellow, removing
see
the yellow sign. Is that
see
what you just did?
Yeah, yeah.
your reactions.
Okay, so how does all of this come together then with Pluto having been in Capricorn and then moving into Pluto?
We could look at for right
Moving
now,
into Aquarius,
just
excuse me. Yeah.
yeah, just the what what Pluto did in Capricorn.
Mm,
Um, in the past, it entered Capricorn in 2008,
mm,
um, and until presently, where it's still there right now, and will on November 19th move into Aquarius for good, and it
yeah.
will stay there for the next 20 years until 2044. So here we have uh, leading up to Pluto and Aquarius, we have all of this structural stuff that's been going on since 2008. We began 2008 where um, it wasn't very good economically, right? We had the housing crisis, the burst of the bubble, which caused the complete revolution of the financial systems, right?
Mm,
Maybe not exactly to where they ought to be, but things got knocked down, and it took a long time for people to recover from that. We had stuff like quantitative easing, where a lot of people feel that we destroyed our monetary system, because you put all this cash you flooded the system with it, right?
mm,
And what did it do? It kind of caused inflation. Um, and then we had, of course, the rise of Trump comes in there, where he's basically been seen on both sides as a wrecking ball to the establishment, right? He's taking things out, whether for good or for ill.
Hmm.
Um, we had really the first massive indication of what climate change is going to do to us. So
mm,
we had, you know, massive flooding, massive fires, all happening in this time that indicated something more than regular weather patterns are taking place. So, that comes to the forefront. Uh, and it's really this wrecking ball to the institution, and um, that as that's going on, um, we're kind of in this nebulous space right now. What that gonna look like, as
Hmm.
things start to change and congeal.
Right.
And
So
so
things
as
are being
we're
destroyed, but they've not quite formed yet.
exactly, yeah, you've had some things reestablished. I mean, COVID. I'm sorry, I forgot COVID.
How can you
Uh,
forget COVID?
I know. And what happens there is we had a complete and utter change of how we work in society.
Mm,
People
Right.
still aren't going back to the office anymore. Um, you know, uh, there's been a lot of changes to the supply chain because of that have not yet been fixed. Um, so, you really have Pluto just having a field day with our
Just fucking things
institutions.
up.
mm,
And what else did we do? We discovered kind of an ugly underbelly, which
mhm,
is a Pluto archetype of, Pluto both conceals and reveals, usually at the worst times.
Yeah.
So we have, hidden stuff coming to light. A lot of that, and that rot underneath is exposed and we know it's there. Now
Right.
what
And
are
this
we gonna
well,
do about it?
Yeah. Well, and I think that that connects to uh, one of the things that is associated with Pluto is the unconscious. And
Hmm.
archetypally speaking, any kind of journey into the underworld is a
Hmm.
journey into the depths of the psyche. And in Jungian psychology, at least, this is the realm of the shadow. And like you said, the shadow stuff is being exposed.
Hmm.
And I think that what we have to recognize is we have to recognize the shadow elements to it, and
Yes.
how they are within us as well. And that's difficult work. Um, you know, and I don't think as a from a American perspective, a USA perspective, we're not doing very good with that. And I also
yeah.
think, I also wanted to point out that Pluto is the god of wealth. Because Pluto
Mm,
is, he's in the underworld, and that's where you have all these, the veins of, the minerals and the jewels, and he is constantly collecting souls, right? And
Yeah.
this is where we get our word plutocracy from,
Yep.
this
hmm
idea of wealth.
Right.
And it's interesting because that, talking about Trump, and we're not going to avoid it. Um, there's no reason to.
Right.
But that's what it represents for some people is, he
hmm
is the symbol of wealth.
Right.
Hmm.
It's plutocratic. Um, I think it's interesting, and I don't know if I can articulate this like I want, but as Pluto goes into, because I also think I'm not that great with astrology. I'm a little bit better with tarot. And I know that Capricorn is the devil card in tarot. And it's the material realm, right? He is Lord of the gates of matter. And Aquarius is the star. And the star really symbolizes hopes and dreams.
Hmm.
But and it's also a feminine card. Her title is the daughter of the firmament, dweller between the waters. And in tarot, though, Aquarius follows the Tower card, and the Tower card is destruction. It's tearing down all of those structures. What Stephanie's been talking about. It's that dismantling of structures. It seems to me that what has to happen is we need to see that shadow of the devil, the gates of matter, the material aspect, and the wealth.
Hmm.
And I think that isn't Aquarius associated with the people. I think you may have said that.
Hmm.
And so maybe the hopes and the dreams are that the people can come to the forefront rather than the wealth.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's the hope of Aquarius.
hmm
And we could see through history when Pluto is there what happens, and you kind of get a mixed bag.
Mm,
You get some really great stuff occurring, but it's still revolution, right? It's
mm,
still got this, and you could see things. Um, there is an underbelly, a dark underbelly to Aquarius too.
mm,
The dark side of Aquarius can be, I know it's better for you, and I'm going to dictate what it is.
well,
And we kind of saw that because like last time uh Pluto was in Aquarius was during the revolution and its aftermath. We saw that with France.
mm,
The French Revolution was pretty nasty,
hmm
and it ends with Napoleon. So
mm,
um it's we have the promise of something, which we certainly did. I mean, democracy. Democracy is is spreading everywhere during the last time it was in Aquarius, Pluto. So, there's this hope and these dreams, and there's scientific revolutions at this time. But on the other side, you know, there's war. There's there is some oppression going on there, and eventually things kind of work out for a little bit, but you got to get there first. So
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
we have to keep in mind that with the promise of hope comes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right.
Comes a lot of suffering, comes a lot of the breaking down of people's lives occurs, and it's very apocalyptic.
Mm.
When you're going through it, it's a shit show, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Well,
that dream comes afterwards.
yeah. And I just wanted to just remind us all from what I read out of Cosmos and Psyche that Tarnus, one of the societal things that he associates with Pluto is fascism. And, not only do we have that concern here, but fascist movements are pretty dominant around the world right now,
Mm-hmm.
various places in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we see that rise coming through Capricorn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pluto in Capricorn is really that exposing some of the problems that we've had along the way that had to be swept away.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, the rise of fascism,
Mhm. Can I
it
just throw out a random association here?
Sure.
We were talking about fascism and the rise and the devil, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
What about the Antichrist? We haven't talked about this at all, but it's just a thought that came to me when we were talking about this.
Stephanie.
well,
Is that a
in
bit too
terms,
much for this episode? Do we need a new episode on this one?
you know what? I'm not quite sure
Well,
where Antichrist fits in there, other than
Well, we
to
talked about the
Trump.
That's a devil sign. And
yes, yes, yes. We could talk about him in those respects, but I would
it,
say that the Antichrist is the precursor to the coming of Christ, right?
right.
It's the coming of enlightenment and beauty and the best of all worlds into our world afterward. So
Right.
the Antichrist is terrible, but he foretells the coming of
Something
actual
much better.
Christ, right?
I
So
can. I think that before we began this, um, Stephanie, you were talking about the historical periods of
Mm-hmm.
when Pluto has been in Aquarius,
mhm,
and one of those was the reign of Constantine. And
yeah,
the reign of Constantine, of course, is when we saw Christianity really starting to spread because it becomes an imperial religion. It becomes
yeah,
a tool of that which it originally was intended to go against. Because when you look at the Antichrist, I mean, technically, I think in the biblical text, we look at both the Hebrew Bible / Old Testament and the New Testament were a story of people fighting against oppression. The
Right.
entirety of the Old Testament is about working against systems of oppression and domination.
Mm-hmm.
And when people think like 666, that's Nero. That's Roman
Right.
oppression. And
mhm,
so I think if we look at the idea of the Antichrist, we have to look at it in terms of imperial oppression. Maybe not even necessarily an individual. There could be an individual that stands in for all of that. And yeah, well, the other thing, the other aspect of that is what are the characteristics and qualities of Jesus?
Right. Right.
Hope, care, generosity, all of these things. And I can think of someone who is very anti that.
Right.
Technically, kinda antichrist. I'm not saying the antichrist, but
Right.
anti what Christ stands for. And you can
mhm,
go through the list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to throw in this because this is sort of my jam. Most of these qualities of Christ are virtues.
Right.
And the republic, and this has been known since, the ancient republics of Greece and Rome, that for republics to stand, the citizens and the leaders have to be virtuous.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
we have to nurture the better angels of ourselves. Otherwise, the republic will not stand. And so when people give way to greed and anger and lust and gluttony and all of these things, we're in for a world of hurt. That is
Yeah.
a open invitation to domination, oppression, and antichrist.
If we look at when um, Pluto in Aquarius in the age of Constantine basically takes place during the entire reign of Constantine.
Hmm.
And if we look at what was happening prior to that, we see the empire's not doing very well. And it's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why Constantine embraces Christianity, because he knows that with Christianity, he gets a whole bunch of territories to stand up and take note,
Hmm.
because Christianity is spreading so far and wide, you know. So this is his unifier. So you have the breakdown of the Roman Empire coming at the same, and then Constantine comes in and says, okay, we're going to revitalize this. And he uses Christianity to do that.
Hmm.
And then we have the spread of Christianity going even further after that. And if we remember, after Aquarius comes Pisces, Pluto in Pisces. And there in Pisces is where you really get this shift going on, where Christianity is going everywhere. And if we remember, what's going on with Aquarius in terms of apocalypse, what was great for Christianity was terrible for paganism.
Hmm.
It completely decimated it. It begins
Right.
that process right there. So people who clung to their old beliefs systematically are destroyed. Even people who are a different brand of Christianity are
Right.
eliminated. We get one state Christianity that everyone's got to follow, and if you're not following this, you're a heretic, and we're going to kill you. And so, a lot of the different branches of Christianity either go underground or they get wiped out.
Hmm.
So, that's what we're seeing with, Constantine's era of Pluto in Aquarius. And we could see that as, a good thing, an advancement in some ways, if you're Christians, definitely. But we could also see it as the apocalypse of everything else,
Hmm.
you
Right.
know. Um,
Yeah, and the
and
destruction of paganism has a lot to account for our relationship to the natural world, and
Mm-hmm,
yeah,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah.
Which is capitalism and money, right?
yeah, well, there's Pluto, the money aspect.
Right. Exactly.
And if we look at Saturn at this time, because Saturn's going to be the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius, you know, um, if these institutions that now come into sight, they're constructed after the Aquarius pass. If these institutions go south,
Mm.
they're not doing well. They're not. Uh, there's some rot underneath. When the next cycle comes around, they're going to be swept up again.
Right.
They're,
Shifting sands.
nothing stays forever, no matter how good or how bad. Eventually, things need to change, and there we have Pluto to wreck it
Yeah.
and
Right.
build something new.
It also seems to me that, and we've kind of touched on this a bit, that things have to be exposed, right?
Right. Right.
And one of the things I was thinking of here is in the myths of Hades, because that was the Greek kind of name for Pluto, his most prized possession was the helmet of invisibility. Pluto, the god, wants to keep things hidden. And
Right.
the power is in exposing things to the light.
Hmm. And that's why he keeps it hidden, right?
Yeah.
Because then he could pop up and say, well, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
All right, wrecking ball.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's what
Right.
happens. He keeps it hidden until uh it works in his favor to reveal it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I say he, obviously these are, not really engendered things, um
Right.
but yeah,
Well,
we just
but gender, I think, is important to consider because going back to the main myth that we have that Hades is involved with is the rape of Persephone. You
mm,
know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the
Your body,
abduct.
my choice.
Yeah.
yeah, right. We're seeing a lot of that now. Um
Hmm.
and I think the revelation there is that this has been in the psyche of humanity for a while,
Hmm.
Right.
um, that no, your body, my choice is kind of the epitome of that myth,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
It's,
Right.
oh, I want that. It's mine. I'm taking
Hmm.
it, and here we are now with people revealing that about themselves, men
Right.
revealing that, and of course, a lot of people don't feel that way, but those who do are about to come into power, and that's a
Right.
frightening thing.
Hmm.
Yeah. And also, I was consulting Robert Graves' book on the Greek myths, and he noted that um, Pluto, Hades, is the most hated of the gods.
Right.
And in part, I would imagine that's because, dead,
Right. Right.
death, but maybe also that plutocratic aspect to it.
Yeah,
Mm.
the idea of the riches, but also, there's another way to look at that, though, right?
Mm,
Because there is a wealth in the Plutonian aspects of the unconscious.
mm,
There is
yeah.
something to be gained there, but
Mm. Right.
it only happens if we take that dark shadow side of us and, as Jung said, made the
Mm,
unconscious conscious. So we are
right.
aware of it and we start integrating it into a more healthy
Right.
aspect of ourselves. We get wholeness from going to the subconscious
Yeah.
if
Right.
we recognize it, if we embrace it and work with it, integrate it, and move
Right.
forward.
But
If
not
we don't do
embrace it
that,
as is, correct? You need to
no,
actually forge it in a way.
you need to recognize it, need to recognize why it could be helpful to you, and then you
Hmm.
integrate it with the wholeness of you. So it's not you're just embracing the shadow,
Right.
and
You're
but
not just
you
being a
are,
dick for dick's sake.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You want to incorporate it without, it becoming to the exclusion of all else, right?
Mm. Yeah, I find it interesting because this is the realm of shadow work, right? And
Hmm.
the, and shadow work's been around probably ever since, Jungian psychology, depth psychology in general, and we have to include Freud with depth psychology.
Right. If we're talking
But
about the Western world, yeah.
yeah, but Jung, is the one that gave us the term the shadow.
Oh, yeah.
But it's really interesting to me because this notion of shadow work has really entered the popular imagination, at least amongst some circles, probably just within the past 20 years or so.
Right.
That's when it's started to become more popular and more people starting to practice kind of shadow work, I suppose. Um, and I keep thinking, I've seen, especially over the past few days, we're recording this for prosperity's sake on just a few days after the 2024 American elections.
Hmm.
Um, but a lot of people talking about being light bringers and light workers.
Right.
And that's important, and I'm not going to deny that. But I always think, we also need shadow workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of people have embraced the idea that light work is shadow work.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because you are bringing the darkness to light, right?
Okay.
Um, uh, so we do have more of that now than we did before, where before it was all light and love and peace and prosperity, and it's sort of delusional if you don't include the
Right.
darkness there,
Definitely.
because if you're, I think several teachers, have said, if you're, one of them being Carolyn Elliott, saying that if you're standing in a pile of shit, but all you're doing is looking at the sun, you're blinded to the fact that you're standing in shit, right?
Right.
You
Right.
have to understand this so that you
hmm
can actually embrace the whole to move forward.
Right. Which kind of brings us back to the American attitude in some ways, because there's a large segment of our population that all they want to do is think America is great.
Hmm.
But we have to look at the unfortunate history that a lot of our country is based on racism. And until
Yes.
we do that and recognize it and deal with it, then we're always going to have problems.
And
Yep.
genocide, Jeremy. It's also
Well,
founded on genocide.
problems is a light word for genocide. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to recognize all of that. And it's interesting because there has been a movement to recognize these things and
hmm
to recognize the importance of that history and diversity and equality and inclusion. And these are things that people are now fighting against.
hmm
And it's interesting because that's always referred to as wokeism.
Right.
And I always find it interesting that people are like, coming out, anti woke. And it's like, so
Right.
you want to stay asleep? you
Right.
want to stay, and what it is they want to stay in the shadows,
Right.
you
They
know?
don't want this to come out. They don't want to have to face it.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I think this is also important to note that it's not just one political party or
Right. Right.
anyone who embraces certain ideology. We all have shadows. They all have shadows.
Yes.
And it occurred. I read. I'm on a listserv for a newsletter, and someone had sent forward something that Marianne Williamson had written, and I don't really follow her at all, but I thought that she had a really good point. She had a really good observation, and I think this is a really good example of how shadow works on the liberal side, because we had, the Democrats have been talking about how Trump's a fascist, and I'm not going to say he's not a potential fascist, because I think that reality is there, and I think we're in for some dark times, but that's kind of been the focus. And this idea of the election was, well, we're choosing between fascism, authoritarianism, and democracy. But yet she pointed out that there wasn't a primary in the Democratic Party, and there wasn't, Kamala Harris, who I wish had won. She didn't go through a primary process. She was just kind of installed in a way, and that's anti-democratic.
Right.
And so I think that's a really good example of
Yeah.
how the shadow can work, is that, we're like, yes, we're democracy here, but yet we're being very anti-democratic in our approach.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think you can ignore that. And I also think it's interesting that we're kind of going in the opposite direction of where we were when Pluto was last in Aquarius.
Hmm.
That period I've said before, was like 1777
Hmm.
to 1799,
Right.
where you had this movement. Of course, the Declaration was signed a year before it entered into Aquarius. So there we had the breakdown of the British Empire started, right? So that's that institutional structure, breaking down. But during the height of the revolution is, we're fighting to break away from England. And then we're also spreading the idea of democracy.
Mm.
This is, the Constitution comes into being at this time, and this new idea comes into play. And, to quote Hamilton, the world turned upside down. And it
Yeah.
really does, because here you get this spawning of all these other revolutions that occur, and democracy is on the rise.
Yeah.
So here now, today, fast forward, and it's like a dismantlement of all that. It's not just the United States and our elections, it's elections all over the world where people are like, I think I'm going to give this dictator thing a chance. So, something to definitely look at and see the connection there of, the cycle of Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it also seems that, I can't speak to everywhere in the world, so I'm going to have to frame this in the, perspective of someone from the United States. But, I think people are legitimately hurting, and
Right.
and a lot of it is with wealth. There's always, it's the economy, stupid.
Mhm.
And our economy is, by all measures, doing really well, and I've heard it
Yep.
referred to as like the the envy of the world. But your average person is struggling, quite a bit, and I would imagine that that's the case elsewhere. And if the Democratic leaders have not been helping or actually addressing that, you're gonna get authoritarianism. You're going to get
Right.
fascism.
Right.
Yeah.
But Aquarius is the people. But at the same time, and this is a slight shift a little bit, but isn't Aquarius also associated with technology?
Yep.
And I can't help but to think that we have this authoritarian figure, and it kind of connecting here with Pluto, and Pluto moving into Aquarius. And here in the U.S., who is he associated with? The wealthiest person in the world. Is that not Plutonian?
Yeah, absolutely.
And associated with technology. Pluto and Aquarius, right there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we look at Elon, and I would say interference with the election, with that lottery, $1 million lottery,
Yeah.
to get people to sign up.
Yeah.
And it did turn out that some of the people that won actually were already registered. So, but when we look at that, yeah, the innovation is definitely there. The innovation and the science, and what we're looking at right now is the growth of AI, right?
Right.
And in fact, when the first time in 2003, when Pluto ingressed into Aquarius for a couple months, was when ChatGPT came out. And I think we talked about this before. ChatGPT came out right then.
Right.
And then the second time it ingressed in January of 2024, and it stayed there for a couple of months. We had Sam Altman, who is OpenAI's grand poobah. He is ousted, and then he's brought back. So there you had like a little small taste of Pluto and Aquarius in terms of technology. And if we look through the ages, what we had during the 1500s, what was the dates? The what are my dates? I have it written down here. 1532 to 1553. We have the Copernican revolution. Is that as the inception? We have the publication of Copernicus's what's it called? The on the revolution of the heavenly spheres comes out. And this completely changes our view of the universe. We go from an Earth-centric view, geocentric view, to a heliocentric view of the universe, which is massive. That undermines the Catholic
Right.
Church. And it coincides with the Reformation, especially like when Henry VIII was king, and you have the breakaway from the Catholic Church occurring at this time, and Henry flips the bird to the church, and it started a little bit earlier, but this really cements it, our breakaway from that. And when we go a little bit further, the next scientific revolution comes another Pluto and Aquarius. We have Uranus is discovered in 1781.
Right.
Uranus is discovered, and it again changes our entire view of the world, because before then we had the 7 classical planets. It ends at Saturn.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, no, it's bigger than that. And we start incorporating these outer planets. The universe has again altered forever for us.
Right.
And also what we had was a vaccine for smallpox occurs at that time. It's distributed a little bit differently. It was like skin on skin. You had to kind of do that. But yeah, I mean, water is understood. The composition of water is understood for the first time. That's major. The metric system came into being. If we go back
Except
further,
for the U.S.
Right.
except for the U.S., yes. If we go back further, if we look, to the Islamic Golden Age in the 8th century, what did we have? The invention of the zero, which again revolutionizes math. So we look at all that, and so what do we have to look forward to as it enters Aquarius in the next 20 years? I'm saying tons of scientific innovations. I think we're going to see more of AI, maybe for better or for worse. New ways of looking at the universe, I think, will come into play. It's amazing to me how it's not just, oh yeah, we had this little scientific innovation. It's the things that really change the way we view our existence. The zero, the heliocentric universe, and so forth. That's what I think we have to look at as we go forward.
Right. Before we started live, we did talk a little bit about the idea of Chronos and death. Could somebody elaborate a little bit on that? Because this may tie in a little bit too.
Well, historically, Chronos is sometimes associated with Pluto, and Chronos is Saturn, right? And Chronos is one of the older gods. He's not one of the Olympic deities. He's one of the gods that come before.
That Titan.
Yeah, he's the Titan. And Chronos had, castrated his father Uranus, and so he has a scythe, right? And Chronos is associated with time. We see him as Father Time, and he always carries a scythe, and it's a scythe is an agricultural tool, but Chronos also is the figure of the Grim Reaper. So it's not just harvesting wheat or the crops at the at the end, but also harvesting souls. And it goes back to that idea there's a connection with agriculture, and that the harvest is death. Technically, the harvest is death, and then you get that rebirth in the spring. Interestingly enough, as well, the going back to this story of Hades and the rape of Persephone, Graves says that he identifies this with the male I can never say this word, usurpation of the female agricultural mysteries. And so it's the patriarchy taking over. He had this idea that there was a matriarchy, right? And but at the very least, there was feminine agricultural mysteries, and that's kind of what the Eleusinian mysteries are in some aspects. But yeah, so there is a association of death and time, but also a little bit of rebirth, right? Because
right.
We see this at the New Year. We celebrate the New Year in a really weird time in January. It should be with Aries. But you have Father Time, and the image is, look for this at New Year's. You'll see it some places, but Father Time with Baby New Year.
Right.
It's the old and the new.
Yeah.
And
Father Time holds that scythe.
Yeah. Well, it's Kronos, it's Saturn.
Right.
A lot. So much of our imagery goes back thousands of years, but
right.
And I don't know how prevalent this imagery of Father Time is anymore. I will talk about this in my classes, and students are like, "Well, I've never seen that before."
Right. Claymation.
Yeah.
Rudolph and the New Year. Anyone see that one?
Rudolph's Happy New Year. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Father Time is represented there.
I've never seen that.
My gosh, Nick.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. It's just crazy things thrown together.
So, like a network was trying to cash in on the popularity of their Christmas show? Say it ain't so.
Right.
One of the things I wanted to note here, though, kind of going back a step, with the mention of like the Copernican Revolution and the Protestant Reformation. I've always connected the Protestant Reformation with the technology of the printing press.
Yes.
And I know that's
absolutely.
been, someone told me recently, and I don't remember the argument that they gave, but they had read an article or something that challenged the idea that the printing press had anything to do with the Protestant Reformation. I still disagree. I think that it very much did. But also, I think that these technologies, they change. I don't necessarily want to say consciousness, but they definitely changed the perception of things.
Right.
Marshall McLuhan argued this, back in the 60s with the his book Understanding Media. The medium is the message. It's not the content, but it's the medium itself and what it does. And he gave the example of, pre-literacy, when you still had these oral cultures, that we viewed things as like everything happened all at once, and you would hear the stories, and that they were kind of like eternal stories. And I always use the analogy of at Easter, when you drive around and see all the church signs, they don't say, Jesus rose. They say he is risen, because it's this idea that it's this eternal present moment, right? It's sort of cyclical. But then when writing was introduced, that changed things to a linear sort of perspective, and it chopped up time, just like letters chop up a sentence, right?
Right.
And then our technologies began to change. We had the printing press, which made it more prevalent and available to people. And it was a challenge to hierarchy. So maybe that's part of that Plutonian element there. It's a challenge to the hierarchy of the church. And it gives it, anyone and not everyone could still afford one, but more and more people could access the Bible on their own and have a
Right.
copy on their own in a language that they could read, not just in Latin. That's one of the important things about the Gutenberg Bible, is that it was in German. It wasn't
Yeah.
in Latin, right? And so McLuhan argued that these shifts in the technologies change kind of our consciousness,
Right.
and
And
that we had radio and then television and then internet, and
right.
I can definitely see how the internet is changing how we think and
Yep.
how we sort of maneuver in the world. And it seems that this is what's going to be happening, especially with the advent of AI. As we go
Mhm.
into this period of Pluto and Aquarius, there's going to be a major transformation of, I don't know if I want to say consciousness, but at the very least, perception.
Right. Perception of reality.
Mm.
Yeah, at
Yeah,
least, yeah.
and here we have that Plutonian element of appearing,
Mm.
because we have a time now where we don't always know what's real and what's not real,
Yeah.
Right.
right? So, I see as Pluto goes into Aquarius that that's going to be a big element. We're going to have probably a lot of fake news, and we're probably going to have, as we go through Aquarius, get closer to the end, more ways for us to um, determine what's real and what's not. Maybe this Saturnian law is coming out where um, this is how we have to use AI responsibly.
Mhm. Right.
Something like that might be. I mean, it has to, because right now no one can really tell what's real and what's not real. It's so easy to fool us, right?
Mm.
And there are some things now that we can use to figure it out. Like, we'll see a figure with 10 fingers, or,
Mm.
there are ways to kind of clue it in, but it's getting better.
Mm.
And I think we might not have those clues that we have now as things progress a little bit.
Mm.
Right.
But I do foresee, like, as Pluto goes through the sign, as things might become more regulated,
Mm.
because that's what Saturn will do. Here's the thing that came in that disrupted everything. Well, we got to figure out how to work with this now.
Mm.
Right.
So it's going to
Right.
put something into place to say, okay, here are the checks on this. We need checks. So and the good news is that that's probably one of the outcomes. The bad news is we got to get there.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got to go through it first.
And
The
the only
only
way
way
out is
out
through.
is through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I keep saying that we're in an epistemological crisis, because how do we determine what is real and what is not? But it's also interesting because, as you were just talking, Steph, I was thinking that sounds a lot like it's Neptune,
Yeah.
because the Neptune's going to be the illusion aspect of things. And I don't know where Neptune is right now, where it's at.
Hold on, let me look.
Yeah, I do know this is a slight. I mean, it's kind of connected, but I have heard astrologers point out that Uranus is going to be moving into Gemini here pretty soon, and every single time that Uranus is in Gemini, the United States goes to war. It corresponds to the Revolutionary War. It corresponds to the Civil War. It corresponds to World War II. And
Yeah. And right now, Uranus is in Taurus.
right, it's going into
A sign
Gemini.
yeah, a sign it doesn't typically enjoy,
Right.
because of Taurus represents real. It's a fixed sign. It represents stability.
Mm.
Um, so Uranus is about to go into Gemini. Right now it's retrograde in
Mm.
Taurus. But I think what we have are pretty early in, I think, 2026, we get a lot of the outer planets moving into new signs. And this
Yeah.
is significant because it takes them much longer to Uranus takes about
Right.
7 to 8 years to go through a sign.
That's next
Pluto,
year, actually. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
next year is when they all shift into signs. Yeah. Sorry to
Wow.
interrupt.
No, that's good. Neptune is currently in the sign of Pisces. It's at the 27th degree. So it's very close to going into Aries.
Hmm.
So we will have Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto all going into new signs and trining each other. Not trining,
Wow.
sextiling each other. So
You know,
So that means chaos, right? Chaos.
it represents a new era.
yeah.
Yeah.
But Neptune kind of clouds things over. Neptune can be really good for like dreaming up new societies, new ways of being. Um, it's a good sign in terms of that dreamy nature of what can be, but it also clouds. It also, it's also a sign of addiction. It's also a
Ooh.
sign of false realities. So, like everything, it has its good and bad. But when you have all of these forming like a sextile with each other, where um, that's concerning because they're also in new signs, which means a new era.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
it will be interesting to see what happens. But
You
yeah.
know, I typically think in terms of tarot, and I couldn't help but to notice that, Neptune is associated with the Hanged Man,
Hmm.
and Aries is the Emperor. And so we're
Yeah.
going to have this connection of the Hanged Man and the Emperor. And not necessarily hanged as in like, let's hang Mike Pence, but rather as new perspectives on one
Yeah.
level, different new perspectives. And it seems like that's going to be an interesting aspect there in terms
Hmm.
of new perspective and kind of going into the depths again.
Yeah.
It's often, the hangman is often equated with the Norse god Odin when he hangs himself on the Odurstrel tree, and he
Hmm.
gives one of his eyes to, was it Memnir or something like that, in order to gain esoteric and occult knowledge. And that's when he is given the runes. So it seems like there may be, when Neptune, just from that perspective, from the tarot perspective, that there is this change of thought of the emperor, of the ruler, of the patriarchy.
Yeah. And you go with Neptune, who co-ruled Pisces with Jupiter,
Right.
and it now about to move into Aries, which is a fire sign. It's a cardinal fire sign. So it's a little out of its depth, right? Putting, and then you have water on fire.
Yeah.
So you have
Steam,
that as
lots
well.
of steam.
Steam, a lot of steam, yeah. So yeah, it's a good point, Nick.
Yeah. The other
About that.
thing that I wanted to mention was that, and this is also taking a step back, when you were talking about like the Copernican Revolution and the
Hmm.
Protestant Reformation, and you mentioned like 1781, and when Uranus was discovered. And that's also this period of the revolutions, the French
Hmm.
Revolution, the signing of the U.S. Constitution. This is also corresponds with the Industrial Revolution.
Yes, 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 yes. And I was going to bring that up, and we got sidetracked. But yeah, the Industrial Revolution and inventions, and it changed commerce. It changed everything. It's um yeah. I don't think you can ignore that with Pluto going into any sign. Is that when something happens like that, like especially in Aquarius, it's major.
Mm.
It doesn't just shift little things here and there, it completely revolutionizes everything we think about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Industrial Revolution occurring at that time, and what does it do? It fucks up the planet, right? Um, and we
Yeah.
go back at the data and can see when the Earth started warming happens to coincide with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. It just occurred to me that Jeremy made a drink for us this week, and we have not shared Jeremy's drink recipe yet.
What?
I know we got carried away, so I know it's a little bit
Yeah.
late, but I think it's a good time to show Jeremy's drink
Thank you.
because we all need to drink now.
Let's make the rum plutonian. Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Kill Devil, where we focus on rum and cocktails. Today we are going to make the rum plutonian. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning to the channel, welcome back. In either case, I hope you enjoy this drink. I just had a friend of mine ask me if I could make a drink in honor of the planet, or what was formerly a planet, Pluto. For those of you into astrology, apparently Pluto is moving into Aquarius. I'm not big on these things, you may be, and my friend is, so they wanted a drink to celebrate. So I did what I normally do, and I go to Google and I look up Pluto cocktails. And the Plutonian is one of the cocktails that came up. The Plutonian is the official drink of a band called A Short Walk to Pluto. And one of the members of the band has a short reel that shows them making this cocktail. I know nothing about this band, but I liked the way the cocktail looked, so I thought I'd give it a try. And it was pretty good, but I thought I could make it a little bit better. The base spirit in the Plutonian was vodka. And as you may know, I'm not a big fan of vodka. What happens if we make this with rum instead? Clearly, we improved the drink. A note on the rum. This was originally a vodka-based cocktail. As such, I'm going to use a white rum. In this case, Bacardi. But use a white rum of your choice. To make this drink, we are going to start with our lime juice. 1/2 an ounce or 15 milliliters of your lime juice into your shaker. Fresh squeezed, of course. And that's it. 1/2 ounce, 15 milliliters of blue curacao. Then 1.5 ounces of your rum. 1.5 ounces, 45 milliliters. And I did put in 2 ounces because I'm going to drink this later. Recipe calls for 1.5 ounces though. Add some ice. Give it a shake. Now I'm going to fill my glass with ice. And this is a Collins or highball. Strain into there. Ooh, that's a beautiful blue color. And we're going to top this off with some tonic water. Normally I use Schwa-Pee-Pees, but we're using Fever Tree today. Garnish. The garnish is a lime twist. It's not a twist. Instead, they roll it up really small. Maybe I should have gone horizontal on this. Horizontal or vertical when you do twists? Let me know. And then they push a pin through it, or not a pin, but a skewer. See if I die here. There we go. And then you throw it angrily into the drink. I don't know why you're angry, but watch the reel. Oh, and a straw. It just kind of sinks to the bottom. That's clever. Anyway, and there you have it. The rum plutonian. Drink with good spirits. Question of the day. What is your favorite drink based on an astronomical or astrological figure or entity of some sort? Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars? Let me know in the comments down below. Note that there are ways to support the channel if you're so inclined. I do have t-shirts available. If you want a t-shirt, you can have a t-shirt. All you have to do is contact me through any of the social media links down below. We'll make sure you get a t-shirt. And while you're at the social media links, you might as well do whatever it is you do at those social media links. And finally, if you made it this far, give me a like, give me a subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss out on anything that I do. And until next time, cheers.
I can tell you why I'm angry.
I can as well, but it has nothing to do with the drink.
I love the way there that you just angrily throw it in there. Just,
Damn it, lime twist! Ah!
Yeah,
That's
and I'm
great.
hoping to make some vodka fans upset by watching that video.
Yeah.
So I improved the drink by adding rum instead. But,
Oh.
there you go. But we also mentioned addiction earlier, so, there you go.
But there you go. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of a Neptunian color to it.
It is. And
Um,
we don't know really what color Pluto is, but a lot of people speculate that it's kind of a light, smoky blue. Mine was a bright blue, but, it's close enough.
well,
We have pictures of
I've
Pluto.
seen, it's kind of like a black with the whole red section of it that look, I don't know, kind of angry.
Okay, there you go then. I should have made a red drink.
Sounds like Mars and Pluto joining forces there, black and red.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah,
Ooh.
that's
We have
what's
Mars going in
happening right.
retrograde.
That's
Mars
kind
in-
of what.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right, Jeremy. Mars is about to go retrograde in December, like December 6th, I believe. But there is currently this opposition between Pluto and Mars, and that there's this tension between the two, and that's not been boding well for any of us. And that tension is going to happen. That opposition is going to go exact 3 times until April. So
Oof.
cheers.
Yeah. And and that's kind of what Rick Tarnas does in Cosmos and Psyche is he doesn't necessarily look at where the planets are, which sign that they're in, but he looks at the relationship and specifically with the outer planets, beginning with Saturn. And so I think one of the questions, and I haven't looked at this, but what are going to be the aspects with Pluto, with Saturn, and with Uranus and with Neptune as we move forward and during this transit of Pluto within Aquarius?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And of course, there are going to be tons of different aspects
Yeah,
because we have
right.
our inner planets, which move very fast,
Right.
unless they're retrograde. And then we have, the outer planets, which move much, much more slowly and will stay in a pattern with Pluto for a while,
Yeah.
because, as we know, they move so slowly. But right now, like right at this very moment, we have Pluto in a sextile with Neptune.
Mm.
Um, uh, so it's like they just stay for a long, long time.
Right.
And and they have different flavors to them. And then at any moment, one of these smaller planet, or these inner planets can move into scope and paint things. That's kind of what they do. So it's going to be something we're going to have to watch astrologically speaking for the duration. It's hard to like see every configuration when you pull out 20 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I know we're kind of nearing the end or going over what we normally do. Kind of. I think we were supposed to do an hour, but we always go an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's what we normally do.
But where are we going with all of this? Because it seems to me, that this initiatory aspect of Pluto, that I don't know. It just seems like we're in for a world of hurt for a while, and it seemed like that for a long time. With the Rebel Spirit Radio podcast, with the people I interview, the idea of initiation comes up a lot, and as does this idea of remembering. I can't even tell you how many guests I've had that say, we need to remember who we are, and I always equate this with shamanic initiation because in shamanic initiations, there are reports, and this isn't literal, but the shaman undergoes a symbolic dismemberment and then has
Right.
to remember themselves, and that's part
Mhm.
of the initiation. And it
Hmm.
seems to me that that's kind of where we are, that we have
Yeah.
to break apart, we have to dismember, not just individually but collectively as a society. We're going to
Hmm.
have to go through this period where we're taking things apart, and that's where we can tap into the strengths of Pluto, of tearing down all these structures. But then we have to remember ourselves, we have to put things back together again.
Right. Right. Hmm.
I think that's the golden Pluto.
Yeah.
That's where it's really at because, as a lot of people would do anything to keep from having to go inward,
Yeah.
and not have to look at the things that we feel shame for, the things that we feel are the icky sides of us. We
Mm.
like to put that off. We like to say, "No, I'm not like that. I'm not like that." When in fact it is part of us.
Mm.
So having to, Pluto is one of those things that will force you to deal with it.
Mm.
We're talking about Pluto in Aquarius very much in a mundane aspect of how it affects the world.
Mm.
But, as Pluto transits, it's going to be affecting everybody's chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have Pluto or if you have planets in Aquarius, it's going to hit those. If you have angles in Aquarius, and this might not make sense to a lot of people. So, like, so if you have planets in Aquarius on your birth chart, you know, and it hits them, you're going to start feeling it in whatever area that planet really affects you on.
Mm.
When I had Pluto going through Capricorn, it hit. I have Jupiter at 7 degrees, and what happened there was it completely changed how I work in this
Mm.
world. Jupiter is the planet of expansion. It's the planet of it's a benefic, so it tries to help you there. It's blessings and it's also the planet of uh, religious thought, of philosophical thought. Um, And so when it hit that for me, I was a teacher, you know. I taught at community colleges, religious studies, actually right up Jupiter's alley. And it completely knocked that out for me. It said, that's not where you belong. I stopped
Hmm.
teaching at that point.
Right.
And it wasn't something I decided on. It was something that happened to me.
Mm.
I couldn't get classes. This was unsustainable. It didn't work. And so I
Hmm.
stopped
Hmm.
through force. And I ended up working in a very different industry, doing something I've never done before.
Right.
And that's kind of what Pluto does as it goes
Hmm.
through. It's that wrecking ball. It just takes things
Hmm.
apart. But then you reform. You figure it out. You know, I now have it about to hit what's called my midheaven and my north node, and these are kind of like your destiny angles. They're not actual planets. They're like the midheaven represents your place in society, what you're known for. Um, and it's about to hit that. I have in Aquarius, I have my midheaven at 0 degrees. So it's already hit it once and backed over it. And now it's going to go right sweeping through it again. And then I have my north node, which is kind of like your destiny, where you're going to end up in this world at 2 degrees of Aquarius. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Um, and I know a lot of people who had, a lot of Capricorn placements have just horrible things happen to them. You know, um, but it didn't stay that way. It's like, okay, this horrible thing occurred, and now I have to rebuild myself. So a
Hmm.
lot of times Pluto hits those things that are lying beneath that aren't sustainable, and it just takes them out.
Right.
And then we rebuild, and then
Hmm.
we rediscover ourselves. So
Right.
I think what we're heading towards is this collectively is a reckoning
Yeah.
where it's
Hmm.
going to, we're going to have to rebuild ourselves. And
Hmm.
it's not easy. It hurts.
Hmm.
And we're just going to have to like go deep inside, figure out what's really important to us and focus
Hmm.
on that.
Right.
And so
We have to
I
remember what's really important. Talking back to what Nick was saying about putting yourself back together, the shamanic initiations.
exactly. I think that's what Pluto, that's the promise of it. If
Hmm.
you actually go deep inside, figure out what's really important to you, what works in your life, and you go with it, you kind of make it happen. Working with Pluto has reaps good results.
Right.
And it's also like it's Saturnian. If
Hmm.
Saturn is like a lot of people, Saturn is a malefic planet, so it does a lot of bad things, but only from a certain perspective, right?
Right.
Because
Hmm.
Saturn is like, okay, show me the work. Put the effort in, show me the work, and then if you've done it all, it will allow you to proceed further, and it gives blessings.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, as hard as it is, as terrible as it is, the more you work with it, the better off you are.
Right.
So,
And this,
and go ahead.
I was just going to say, some of this reminds me of the previous conversation. Is all kind of coming together in my head in a certain way. I did study angels for a bit. And the angel of death, Azrael, who,
Hmm.
by the way, is not one of the fallen, is an initiator,
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
transition from one state of being to the next. And this reminds me a lot of that. It sucks, but on the other side.
there are the blessings, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's what it is. It's like, oh, I don't want to go through this. This is just terrible. It's gonna really hurt my family. And yeah, it is. You don't sugarcoat it. It's really gonna hurt. But on the other side, here you go. Here it is. In a lot of pagan beliefs and in beliefs about, for witches, uh, Saturn is the planet of the witches, and it's because of this idea of its karmic value and its, you know, putting all the effort forward, and, if you prepare right now, it will pay you back later, but you have to prepare. You have to know what's going on and you have to do the work. And if you do all that, you're more prepared for catastrophe, right?
Hmm.
If you plan for the winter, you're going to be better off, later on because
Right.
you got all the storage of the food and the supplies that you need to get through the winter.
Right. So become a
And
prepper is what you just said.
yeah, really. I mean, don't all go out buying toilet paper right now, but you know, um, do prepare in a sane, rational sort of way, and that
Hmm.
will, that will get you through the hard times.
Right.
Sorry, I was just making a note here because I all of that, yes, but I also am thinking, of course, because this is who I am, with the connections with Eleusis that, uh, you know, um, some altered states of consciousness and connections with Dionysus, with a Dionysian frenzy. And I know that Tarnus, one of the things that he connects Pluto with is sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, uh-huh.
So there's hope. There's hope. It's not all a shadow. So
No,
all right.
no, it's not. I think that's also important to keep note of,
Yeah.
is that everything is cyclical.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like we may not always repeat, but we rhyme, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And if it doesn't fix itself this time around, it will next time.
Yeah.
It all comes around again.
Yeah, it does. It does. So I think we're pretty much at the end. Is there anything, any remaining thoughts or observations that either of you would like to share?
No, I'm good.
I'm good. Like and subscribe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for reminding me. Doing the same with Jeremy's channel too. This actually should even have a, I don't even know what it's called, like a super like, an ability for people to,
Ooh.
I don't know, donate a couple dollars if they like, if they find worth in this. We'll see. And also check out the Rebel Spirit Radio podcast and, of course, Jeremy's Kill Devil YouTube channel.
Yeah,
And
thank
also
you.
check out Nick's Patreon account.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Subscribe
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
in the
there we
big
go.
way, because we're going to need money coming in
We need some Plutonian something
Yeah.
something.
with
Yeah.
with the new election results and it's
Right.
Yes,
money coming in help
help fund the revolution and the
help
rebellion.
fund it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Stephanie and Jeremy, thank you both again very much for
Thank
joining
you,
me
Nick.
again. And I think that our next one, if I not confused, is a year in review.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun.
Mhm.
Yeah. Won't it though? Won't it though? So, and I don't have the date of that on the top of my head. Do either of you have that?
Would be the 14th, second Saturday
Yeah.
in December.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
14th.
The 14th. Okay. And then
Saturday the 14th.
yeah. And
Ooh,
then I leave.
not Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
The 14th is the worse than the 13th.
Yeah. And then I leave the country in 3 days after that. So, and we'll see if I come back. But, with internet technology, we can
Right,
still
we'll
do
still
this. So, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, thank you. And thank you for anyone who's joined us today. It is very much appreciated. And we appreciate everything that you do for us. So, all right. Until next month, cheers to the apocalypse.
Here's to us.
Yeah, I'm out. So I need a refill.
In a moment. In a moment.
Yeah.